Okay, we're in our astronomy gallery right now. This is a gallery that we put together several years ago on an incredibly limited budget. In some of the other videos I've talked about the extraordinary price of exhibits. These are things that we all built here. Every one of them came together here, and we put this entire gallery together on something like $4,000 or $5,000, which most science centers would never even really attempt, honestly. So this gallery, in my opinion, it does lack some big punch and pizzazz a little bit. That's partially a reflection of the budget, but there are still, in my opinion, a couple or a few really cool things in here. And this, honestly, this innocent looking deal here is really one of my favorite ones. So when I show this exhibit to people, what I really have them do is just sort of say, okay, what are these things in the case, you know? And almost anybody can figure out what they are in the case that they're planets, you know? And I always have people say, okay, which one is Earth? And they'll look, and if you look, you'll see that this one right here is Earth, okay? And then I'll ask them if there are any other planets that they know the name of. Lots of people know Saturn because it has the distinctive rings. But other than that, it's kind of random if anybody really is going to know any other planets, okay? But I have them guess the planets and then explain that the idea of the exhibit is the planets are all scale size to one another, okay? So this is how big Earth is compared to Jupiter in particular. He's like the big boy in our solar system. And Saturn, they're the really big ones. And then much further out, there's these. These are considered like the inner four and the outer four planets. And so they're all done to scale size. And they are hung in the order that they are from the sun. So Mercury, the closest, I think, which is Neptune, that's the furthest away. And all that is explained here on this sign. Okay, so I usually introduce the idea of this exhibit by just talking about the planet. But as you can see, the name of the planet is 8-foot sun. Of course, many visitors aren't really very diligent about reading signs, which is putting it as absolutely as politely as possible. But so what I will often do after introducing sort of the idea of the planets and having them sort of like maybe talk through the planets a little bit is say like, okay, what's missing? What's missing from the solar system? That's a hard question. Not very many people are able to get that without a few more hints, you know? So I'll say, oh, there's something in the middle of the solar system that all the planets go around, and usually that's enough for most people to figure out what's missing. And so they'll say the sun, and then I will tell them to find the sun, okay? Well, by then they're sort of looking in the case, okay? And I usually try to set people up here at the front, because the trick is that the sun is behind the case, okay? The trick is over here on the wall is the sun, and the sun is 8 feet in diameter. The sun is the exhibit for which I risked my life in a very sincere and horrifying way to lift that sun up there with the help of many staff people using a pulley up here from the ceiling to mount that on the wall. We had to come up from below in Gallery A, which was genuinely the scariest thing that I have ever done at this job or any job. Which is coming up underneath the sun on the lift. But that's a whole other story, not really relevant to the exhibit's discussion. But that's the size of the sun compared to the planets. So you see Earth here is about the diameter of less than a quarter, I would say, and the sun is 8 feet in diameter. I think that I read, and maybe it says here, that more than in fact, it's way more than 1 million Earths could fit inside the size of the sun. And so, like, the planet scale is kind of interesting, but when you bring it out to that, it's like a wow moment, okay? When we were first putting this exhibit together, we talked about trying to do a scale distance as well, not just scale size, but scale distance. But even on this scale, where some of the planets, like Mercury there is about the size of a pea, even on this scale, not one of these planets would fit in anywhere inside our building. That's how far flung they are, okay? And the sign shows where some of the planets would be. Like Mercury would be on the far edge of our parking lot, and we are on the opposite side of the building, so that's really pretty far away. Some of them, Neptune is all the way out by James River Freeway and Kansas Expressway, if you know Springfield well. It's on the absolutely farthest south edge of town. But one thing that I will often show people is Earth, okay? And so if you look out this window right here, this is looking towards the square. And up over the very top, you see that white building with the blue air conditioning unit on the top. That's the HERS building. And so I will often point out to people that Earth, which is again about this diameter of a quarter, would be sitting basically right in front of that white building. If the Earth were 8 feet in diameter, it would be that far away in its orbit around the sun. So one thing about space, And one of the things that made really getting exhibits for this area really difficult is it's just really, really big. And this was one attempt to illustrate just the scale, and that's just of the solar system. Honestly, it really gets crazy when you go out from there, okay? Because we are still just a blip, a dot in the grand scheme of things. But this is sort of an introduction to the scale of things when you are working in astronomy, when you are looking at space. So start with the planets, their size scale, bring in the sun, and then the distance scale, which we couldn't really illustrate, but you can look out this window and get a sense of it. I think this is a really cool exhibit. So, but on its own, it definitely benefits from some facilitation, like what we're doing right here.